Today's synth video was made possible thanks to DistroKid. It's a service that lets you upload unlimited amounts of music to Spotify and iTunes and Tidal and a bunch of other stores. So check them out at the link in the description. It's a really affordable service and you support the channel. Today I got a tiny package here from what I think is 1010music, and I think it's a tiny drum synthesizer. I do have a knife, but I'm not entirely sure where I put it, so I'm gonna use my fingers. So it's a new nano box, a Razzmatazz from 1010music, and I think that it's not just a drum synth, I think that it can sample as well. It's also a drum machine. I think it has a little sequencer built in from what I read about it, and this is what it looks like. Super cute. And in the box beside the drum synth we get a matching USB cord and one of those small MIDI adapters. Now for those of you who haven't seen my previous nano box review, there is the yellow one, the lemon drop. It's a granular synthesizer. And then there's the fireball. Which is more of a wavetable type synthesizer. And in my previous review I said I really like the lemon drop. I don't like the fireball as much. I think there's better options out there for a wavetable synthesizer, but the lemon drop is actually quite unique because it's a granular synth and that's kind of unusual. So I'm quite interested to see what I'll think about this one. It's interesting because we haven't really seen a drum synth in this small package before, and I think it also can sample. So let's check it out. I was quite excited to try it out, so I created my first little drum kit. And used the poly and play to sequence it. And I can quickly save and we can load something else. I don't want to sound too hype, and I'm pretty sure I'll have some negative things to say later in the video, but this drum machine makes a lot of sense. So let's start with a little overview. First we have the touch screen that you use to trigger sounds. You also have these buttons here and the knobs. So for example, we can just move between different pages here with different settings. But there's also a nifty function. So if we hold down the home button, you get this teleporter screen, which gives you basically an overview of all the different pages that there are for changing up the sound. You can go to the dashboard, which lets us change a bunch of settings for the sound. We can go to the mixer, we can check the mutes. We got effects sends, and when you are in one of these menus like the effects sends, you can press the button here to just go into the delay, the reverb, and the distortion. And I'm sorry, I will be moving the nano box around because it's a small thing and it's hard to keep it in one place, so I'm sorry for that. I think that the touchscreen, it's quite responsive. And if we look at the back of the unit, we have USB to power it. We then have MIDI on mini jacks, and you need these adapters and you get one with the unit. And then we have clock input as well as line input and line output. Those are stereo inputs and outputs. And you then have a micro SD card where you can put your samples. The screen is a real fingerprint magnet, and note that the screen actually have huge bezels, so the screen might appear larger than it is. So what kind of drum machine is the Nanobox? Well, it's an 8-voice digital drum machine. Each drum sound here consists of, let's go in here, 2 oscillators. You can see them here. So these are FM oscillators. I'd say that you can get some pretty standard like virtual analog sounds out of them as well for drums, because you have different waveforms that you can choose between and you can then apply a filter to them. So pretty standard subtractive stuff. But you also have, if we go down here, you have frequency modulation. So you have a sine wave modulator that will affect the carrier. So we have FM amount here, ratio, mod pitch, FM feedback. So it's an FM oscillator, but you can make some pretty standard subtractive sounds with it as well. So voice can have two oscillators, but also a sample. So you can load whatever sample you want into it. So here we have a list of samples. It's a little slow to play them back. It's not perfect. And then you just load the sample. You can set the level, the pitch, the detuning. You also have a ratchet mode, so we can turn that on. So it creates a ratchet using the sample. And the samples and the FM oscillator is blended together. So we can actually just listen to the oscillators and blend in the kick with the weird ratcheting. I'm not sure what I did there. So at the core, that's what the Nanobox is. And if we go to the snare here, for example, we can actually change the model. So there's a kick model, snare model, closed hi-hat, open hi-hat, and tom. And you can also just choose a sample. And there's also this slice model and clip model. So you can only have one of these. So either a clip model or a slicer. The clip model is for loops, and the slicer, as the name implies, basically uses a sliced up sample to play back individual slices. Now both of these require a bit of setup before you put a sample inside of the Nanobox. So you can't, for example, create a sliced up sample on the Nanobox. You have to do that in some other software hardware before. So I won't really touch much on the clip and slicer functionality, because I don't think that, I'm not a big fan of having to set stuff up before you put it into a device. Rather, I would have liked it if you could, for example, slice up a sample on the Nanobox, but apparently that's not possible. So I'll touch on it a little bit later, but I won't go into detail. Something I do think that they've done a great job with is the preset management. So the unit comes with a bunch of preset kits. So let's load something. But in addition to the kits, you can also save a pad. So we can press save pad here, and we can choose where to save it, and then change the name for it. So call it Bow 2, enter. And now we can actually go in here and we can load a pad. So here we have two different ones. So let's load this one. And if we go to the kits menu here, we can just create a new one. Clear, let's call it Bow 3, 4, wait, Bow 3. So now we have an initialized drum kit here, and I'm gonna try and quite quickly show you how you can create some sounds from scratch with it. So to do this, I'm using the plug and play to sequence it, because I find that more, I find that a little bit more intuitive and easier. So let's start here with the kick, and the second oscillator is gonna be a triangle. And let's see if we can detune it a bit. And we can change the FM amount. So we have the two oscillators. Now I want to add a wave file here. So let's see here. This one. So I think this sounds okay. Now we can add a filter. There's two filters. You can have them either like in series or in parallel. You can also choose not to use them for the samples. It only affects the oscillator. So let's enable this one. So as you can see, touch sensitive. And for every parameter with the 3 dots, you can set up a modulation. So just select the parameter, for example, cutoff, hit the right arrow here, and here you can see that you can have different sources. So 3 sources here, and we can select, for example, LFO to control the cutoff. And if we go to the dashboard, you have the setup for the LFO. So we can set the speed. There's also different waveforms. So let's do something with the snare. And here we have 2 oscillators. I think they're just set to noise. I think you can also, you can do the other waveforms as well. We have the same FM settings here. So let's see if we can make an FM snare. And let's add a wave file. So we're looking for a snare. And I probably should note, if I run the beat, that under macro controls we can change a lot of things. Such as pitch bend. Add a bit of snap to the kick. We can change the mix between the oscillator and the waveform. Control the filter. Add some distortion. And we got similar macro controls here for the snare. Let's do something with the closed hi-hat, and just from the macro control page, and change a bunch of things. And all of these controls can be CC controlled as well. So let's go in here, let's add a wave file. There's just a sample. Let's mix in the oscillators. Can add some more snap. Sing in the open hi-hats. And in terms of effects, I've showed you here that if we go to effect sense here, we have the delay, we have the reverb, we also have the distortion here. Now, we don't only have that, we also have this DFX. So let me show you here. There we go, and go in here. And now you can see here, DFX. So here we have different effects basically. So you, for example, can use a resonator, you have snap and snap level, you have distortion, bit crushing. So we took a tom sound and made it into this metallic percussive noise using the resonator and some distortion. So this is how far we've come with our little kit here. And now let's just go in here and we can change this. No, wait, get back. It can be a little, fiddly, changing the models, for example. You know, there's a ton of different menus up here. For example, we can go in here and start the sequencer. We can change the model. Yeah, you can see it's, if you have large hands, it will be easy to just hit something accidentally. So we've selected model, sample. Let's see if we can push this sound a bit. First up, let's add some effects to it. We can add a filter. And we can control the cutoff here of the filter using a bunch of different sources. So let's use envelope number 2. And now we can go back here and we can change envelope number 2. And we can even modulate the decay of envelope number 2 using, for example, let's see here, the LFO. Let's add the resonator, and let's add some snap. Some distortion, and some bit crush. And we can modulate it using the LFO. So yeah, that's how you make sounds on the Razzmatazz, and I think it makes quite a lot of sense. Next up, let's have a sip of the coffee and talk about the sequencer. So it's a 64-step sequencer. I don't think it's capable of any kind of polyrhythms or polymeter. As far as I know, the step length applies to each of the 8 tracks, but there is a little sequencer in here, and let's play something. Regardless of where you are in the menus, you can press up here to bring out the controls for the sequencer. So you can see swing, BPM, we have a metronome. We can also increase the level of the metronome, record, you can tap tempo. So recording is for live recording using the pads or a MIDI controller. From the main screen, we press this button to see the sequences. And then we use these arrows here to move between the patterns and the actual steps. And a neat thing is that you actually see which steps are occupied by other sounds. So you see how some are pinkish purple and some are grayed out and some are black. That indicates, if we use this knob here to change sound, that they are filled with another sound. And on the next page we have velocity per step. And on the next page we have the step length and step count. And you can have up to 64 steps. Let me show you how to make a pattern. So we go into an empty one and we choose the kicks. Use this knob here to change the sound. And let's place down a few kicks and press play. And that's how easy it is. And we can just switch back to the other one. You can, of course, live record into the sequencer. We can turn on the metronome. We can go out here. And all things considered, I think that the sequencer works well as a very, very basic step sequencer. It's nice to have it on the unit, but of course I much prefer using an external sequencer with this little drum machine. I definitely say that Razzmatazz is better as a drum module connected to an external sequencer. You'll have more fun that way. But in a pinch, you have this little step sequencer, and it seems to work pretty well for what it is. Like, given the small screen, it's pretty well thought out, and it's easy to just move between sounds. So it's actually quicker than you might think. So it's pretty quick to throw something together. Now I think that because the Nanobox doesn't come with a built-in battery and you have to power it using USB and a little power bank, that does defeat the purpose of a built-in sequencer somewhat. But like I said, in a pinch, it works. So the sequencer works, but do you want to hear about something that also works really well? Here's 5 reasons to try out DistroKid. Firstly, you sign up for about $20 a year and you can upload unlimited amounts of music. Secondly, it's really quick and easy to upload. Basically, anyone can do it without any prior knowledge. 3, there are different tiers of subscriptions. So if you want to release your music under, say, different artist names, or if you're starting a label, DistroKid has an option for you. 4, DistroKid lets you upload to relevant stores and streaming services such as Spotify and iTunes, and it doesn't take long for the music to be available in the stores. 5, there's also the hyperfollow feature, which automatically creates a custom page where people can find out where to buy or listen to your music, and I personally really like this feature. So go and check out DistroKid using my link in the description. You get a little discount and you support the channel. Now let me briefly talk about the slicer track and the clips track. So, to reiterate, the slicer track plays back a longer sample with already existing cue points or time markers that you have created somewhere else, like in your 1010music black box, for example. So you have to prepare the sample beforehand. So if we listen, this is a longer sample that contains different slices. And here's a pattern. And you can go in here to the slicer menu. And as you can see here, we have the waveform. There's just an envelope. There's a setup here. So there's not a lot of things you can do, but what you can do is you can change the order in which the slices are being played back. So here it's being played back forward, but you can have it backwards, randomized, staggered, or none at all. So let's listen to it none at all. So it's just playing back the one slice. And if we go back here and we put it to random, so because you can't create the actual slice points, even if you record something into the Nanobox, because you can't edit the sample, this becomes a less useful feature. And I definitely think that they should add the ability to edit samples on the Nanobox in a future update. And then we have the clip track, which is basically just a track for playing back loops. They have to be pre-prepared. They have to have a nice start and end points, otherwise they won't loop correctly. But that's basically what it is. And in terms of what you can do here is you can set the quantization, you can set the syncing, you can set the filter and resonance, but there is not a lot of settings. So basically it's just a little loop playback track. And then we have sampling. So you have a stereo input here on a mini jack, so you can sample into the Razzmatazz. However, this is probably one of the most underdeveloped features. I don't see it as like a big unique selling point, because if we go in here on a track and we select the sample and press right here, oh no wait, press the sample and press right here. Here we have the input. So now we can play something and you can see the audio levels here. You can also select whether it's stereo or left or right, or change the gain. You can also set a recording threshold. I can't exactly see where like there's no super clear indication, for me at least, maybe I'm missing it, but there's no super clear indication of where the recording threshold is in regards to the incoming audio. At least I'm failing to see it. For example, on the Digitact, you can actually see where you set the threshold, like with that little marker. So yeah, this feels a little confusing to me. And also, there is no trimming of samples that I've found anyway. Nothing in the manual, nothing that I've been able to figure out. So if I press record here, I have to then press, oh wait, manually press stop. And now we have the sample. Oh wait, we probably have to change the decay. Let's see here. Okay. This is actually a good example here. Since I recorded 2 hits, I basically only have the decay and the envelopes to work with if I want to shape it. There's no trimming here that I've found. You have the level, you have the pitch, detuning, ratchet mode, but there's no way that I've found to actually edit the sample, changing the start and end points of the sample. So I think that, for example, here's just a suggestion, what I think they should do. So we have a sample track here. If we go into models, you see that there's a sample model. So if I select this, I would actually say that it would be really nice for the sample model to be the default model that you sample into. So what do I mean by this? Well, you could have different macro controls for it, or under, when we add a wave file here or record a wave file, you could actually have some sort of setting where you could change the start and end points for the sample. I think that they might very well update this device to add more features, but as is, I feel that the sampling is very, very basic. But in its current state, I don't see why I would sample into this device rather than just loading wave files. It seems like I don't gain much by being able to sample into it, unless I just happen to have a drum machine hooked up and I really want to sample just a kick drum. Something I also noticed, if we sample something, let's see here, let's sample a kick, you should be able to hear that there's a lot of click. This transient that you're hearing, the click, isn't on the original. So even with snap, for example, all the way down, we still have this little click, which I think is because it didn't sample at 0. So while I think that this device has many strengths, it's very fun as a drum machine, I think that the sampling needs a lot of work. So here's my final thoughts about the Razzmatazz after using it for about a week. I started the video by saying that this makes a lot of sense, but that I might also have some critical things to say about it. And yes, it makes a lot of sense, but there's also some things that confuse me. So number one thing that I think that the nano boxes are missing is a built-in battery, because they're super small, super portable, but as soon as you have to connect it to a larger battery, power bank, it just takes away from the experience. These with like a battery compartment or a built-in, I guess a battery compartment might not fit, but a small built-in battery would make a lot of sense. Like for example, the new Rolands, the Rolkas, they make a lot of sense because of their built-in batteries. Secondly, the slicer, the clip launcher or clip player, and the sampling are underdeveloped. They just need a bit more work. They need an update or two to be truly useful. Like, it's nice that we have the options for them, but since the 2 track types require a setup and it's not like something that's super accessible, it's not like people have already sliced up longer samples with these kind of markers on them. I didn't quite know what it was even when I got this device, to be totally honest. I had never done something like that. That's just not something that I would see myself doing anyway. So that is something that needs to be able to happen on the device itself. And for the clips track, I think that you should be able to just sample into this device, set the start and the points, and then have your little loop. And then we have the price. So you'll have to check. I rarely say the exact price in my videos because the prices actually change over time and my videos are viewed over a long period of time. So check the prices for these devices, what they're currently at. But given the competition, especially from something like the Drumlogue. You have the Roland drum machines, for example. There's also a ton of analog drum machines out there. You know, there's a lot of competition in the drum machine field. You have the Digitact, which is of course a lot more expensive than the Nanobox. So there's a lot of competition. Those were the negatives when I was testing this device. But overall, I actually had a lot of fun with it. And I think the reason is, if you enjoy this small form factor, the small form factor of, say, the Lemon Drop or the Fireball, and just in general, like something really tiny on your desk, this makes a lot of sense. It's a sample and digital oscillator-based little drum machine, drum module. You can do a lot of tweaks on it. There's a lot of things you can modulate. It's not perfect, but it's also pretty original, pretty interesting, it works pretty well. And I don't see a lot of competition in terms of like the size. It's a very small little drum machine. Just give me a second. Just look how cute and tiny it is. And you can use this as a drum module. You could use this to trigger samples. And I think that just playing the presets on it made me feel like, yeah, this is interesting. This sounds interesting. I immediately got stuff going with it that sounded pretty good and pretty interesting, especially if you look at my first little demos in this video. So overall, not too bad. I quite like it. So that was my little review of the Razzmatazz from 1010music. I'm probably butchering the name as I usually do when I haven't heard anyone else pronounce it, but let me know down in the comments if this is interesting to you or if not. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up, leave a comment, and I hope you have a great day. Talk to you later.